technology. So if you haven't already done so, please enter polev.com/level5. It's in the chat box if I said that too quickly, and answer the 3 questions that are there. So without further delay, I'll turn it over to Matt and Claude. They've got to put together a great presentation today. Thank you.
Mary Lou, thank you. Appreciate it. Speaking is Claude Ricks, and Lauren, if you could go to the next page, please. Just to put names to faces, I'm the guy on the left. Matt, my partner in the middle, is joining, and thank you, Mary Lou, for pulling us together. We're quite excited about this. We're going to reveal some answers to the questions that we just asked, and then we'll start up. So, Lauren, if you could go to the next page, please. Russ, those answers should be there. A lot of others: healthcare, professional services, financial, technology. I'll be curious to see which ones we missed. 30, so more than a third of you in another industry. Russ, would you go, or Lauren, next page, please.
Actually, if people could type in for the others, type in what field you're from so that we can capture it, please.
Oh, in the Zoom chat, that would be helpful,
in the chat.
please. Yes, thank you. Lauren, next page, please. So interesting. That's about what we thought would be happening. Most of us have figured out this is not done in a few weeks. It is a new normal. So 2/3 of us are in the space of we're implementing against a new normal. A small percentage, and that's about what we expected to see, a small percentage are starting to figure out a rebound strategy. Some folks are still dealing with their tactical pivots. Glad to see that there's no one in number 1, which would kind of be a head in the sand. You're all way ahead of that. And I don't think any one of us has got a clear idea of what phase 5 looks like, so not surprised to see no one there. Interesting. Next page, please. So we've got a few comments. More ideas to be successful with our new normal. That will be the purpose of our conversation today. How to maintain safety, but have more in-person interaction. How to undo the acceptance of social distancing. That's a big question. I'm hoping to support AgeWorks in its current endeavor. Okay, if there's any other comments that you want to add in terms of getting out of this conversation, drop them in. We'll come back to this page. And I should let you know that at the end of this conversation, we'll use the same technology again to do a wrap up in terms of questions. Lauren, could you go to the next page? From our perspective, so Matt and I have pulled this together. We are both partners in our Level 5. We're a management consultancy, a boutique management consultancy located in downtown Toronto. Our clients are typically Southern Ontario clients, and we've both been very active in the space of brand and customer journey. So there shouldn't be anything that should surprise us today, but you never know. We have 3 objectives that we think you'll get out of today's webinar. Number 1, how to make sense of the changes in consumer attitudes and expectations that COVID is causing. COVID's here for a little while, and it's driving some change, so it'll be interesting to see what those attitudes and changes are. We wish to provide you a thesis of what is underpinning these customer shifting expectations. And then thirdly, how do you react in the near term? What are the implications for your business model, your customer relationships, and your brand experience? We've got some very tactical next steps for you. Lauren, next page, please. Thank you. The header says it all. Unless you're on a sailboat, like one of those couples that I saw on the Globe and Mail on the weekend that has their family in the middle of the Pacific and really didn't know what's going on, times are changing. And this only to say that the majority of Canadians are either unsure or pessimistic about our economic recovery. That really says this isn't going to get done with a snap of a finger. This is a long-term issue. No surprise to anyone on the phone. You all know that. Next page. It also should not surprise you that spending habits have changed and are changing. And as you look at this page, there are some things about being hopeful for the future. My ability to work has been reduced, my optimism. And down at the bottom, the last two that are circled in red, I'm cutting back on my spending, and given my personal finances, I have to be careful how I spend my money. And you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, strongly agree or disagree, those two indices are actually getting worse. And this particular survey was done by McKinsey and is about 3 weeks old. I was just looking at their same survey from a week ago, and it says the same thing. It only is getting worse as this lengthens. Next page. Social distancing is only one of the long-term impacts. 3/4 of folks that are surveyed believe their finances will be affected in a period of greater than 2 months. I've talked to lots of folks, and everyone that I've talked to is basically thinking we have a year issue. It's going to be next year before anything returns to normal. I'm sure all of you have got personal stories of friends not wanting to travel until there's a vaccine. I personally don't think I'll get on an airplane for a little while. That's just what my response to this is. And all of us that have involved in this have had a chance to hear those stories. Next page. There's a lot of depth on the page that you're looking at right now. This is a series of Canadians' top concerns, and there is a prominent theme emerging that I'll speak to in a second. But as you look at it, again, 2/3 of people surveyed are uncertain about the duration, but they're also, as you look down the list, things like taking care of my family, my personal health, my relatives, are they in vulnerable populations, my impact of upcoming events, my not being able to get the supplies I need. Many of these are not related to the macroeconomy. They're more related to how I feel and my concern and for my safety as well as my family's safety. So there is a feeling of I'm personally concerned about what's happening, and that's driving change. It's not just macroeconomy issues. Next page. There's a lot on this page, but I'll summarize it for you. On the top right, this model has been published by the Board of Innovation. If you're all looking for an interesting site to go see, the Board of Innovation is a consultancy out of, I think, Amsterdam. I follow them personally. They have a lot of great thinking, but it's a really cool, very simple model. Talks about health measures being that orange bubble. So the notion of health measures driving a low-touch economy, those are driving economic disruptions. Those economic disruptions are driving behavior shifts. And as you can expect, this is kind of virtuous cycle. One leads to the other and continues to reinforce and augment. When those kinds of cycles happen, habits change. So it's not a change, a behavior I change today and then revert tomorrow. It's self-perpetuating. And there's a age-old piece of wisdom that says, things that occur that I do more than 21 times become habit. This story is basically letting you know that your customers are being forced to do things that they normally would not do, and those things are becoming habit. The other piece on this page is very interesting, is we're in for a long journey. This is not a one and done. So what some folks describe this as a ripple effect or aftershocks. So social distancing will close down, hygiene will close down, travel restrictions will lessen, limited large gatherings will lessen, but it won't be complete by the end of the year. Most economists and academics view that this is a 1 to 2 year period. If you combine both of these messages, that this is a 1 to 2 year period and that behavior shifts are turning into habit, habits become sticky and they will become long lasting, and they drive decision making by customers as they seek to purchase products. That's the key message on this page. And if you're running a business, either as a single shingle person, or you're running a business where you're interfacing with customers, your ability to understand that their decision-making choices are now becoming habit is an important piece of this context. Lauren, next page. If I can summarize for you those 4 or 5 slides, it's on this page. COVID is driving change in our emotional decision drivers, which Matt is going to talk about shortly. Those emotional drivers are translating to changes in habits. Those consumer habits are changing what we expect as customers. And those changes are material to how we conduct our business. Today, we hope to answer that question, that if you follow this logic, your ability to understand the changes that you need to be aware of to conduct business in this new world, we think will help you open up the keys to a more sustainable future. Lauren, over to you, Matt, if you wish.
Okay, thank you, Claude. So the next 10 minutes is really going to talk about the power of emotions. Actually, if you could go back one, Lauren. You know, when you're trying to drive revenue to your business, when you're trying to keep your customers, when you're trying to become relevant to your customers, as your customers just start to get back into things, there has never been a more salient time to understand the value and importance of emotion. I mean, we are living in an emotional supercharged environment, and it's critical as owners and business leaders and entrepreneurs, et cetera, that you understand the role of emotions from your customer's point of view. This is an insight I wish I had. I spent the first 20 years running brands around the globe like Pepsi and Kraft, and I wish I really understood the power of emotion. But if there's one takeaway I want you to take away from this section, it is this: that the decision to buy, the decision to join, the decision to sign up, to donate, regardless of what it is, the decision is at least 50% emotional. It's how you make your customers feel and how you personify yourself. The other side is rational, which we understand very well. But your value proposition at the end of the day has to be a combination of what your customers would get and how you make them feel and how you personify yourself. That's the big takeaway from this section. Let me give you an example. So the next page, years ago, we worked with the guys down in Waterloo and BlackBerry when Samsung was just an echo in the wind and Apple was the new guy in the block. You know, and if you got business people, government people, individual consumers around the table and you asked them about their cell phone, or you went on a survey and you asked them about your cell phone, they'd all talk about functionality. In BlackBerry's case, we all love their keyboard. You know, and BlackBerry would talk about its functionality, the megapixels, the size of its and length of its battery life, and all that stuff was important for sure. But at the end of the day, there was also another 50% of it, which is the next slide. So when BlackBerry was out there talking functionality, Apple was talking about connecting you with your loved ones on FaceTime. And so Apple understood, and BlackBerry did as well, that it was a mix of emotional and rational. And that the cell phone was a reflection of who you are, whether it's the design that you pick, the apps that you have, the music you have on your phone. There's a very, very important emotional component to buying and choosing a cell phone. Even to this day, when Apple comes out with a new product, it never ceases to amaze me the number of people that line up at a store to buy a $1,500 phone when their previous phone was fine. And that really does tend to show the power of emotion. So again, what you need to think about in your product or your service or your brand experience, every time you reach out to a customer, is how do you want to make them feel? And what are they feeling today? Okay? So the power of emotion is really critical. And you know why I'm saying it's supercharged right now is because we are feeling extremely emotional about absolutely everything. Science tells us emotion is the glue of memory. So I'm sure we all have memories from our childhood, both good and bad, that are seared into our memories because it was so emotional, right? It's how we tend to file things in our memories around emotion, and they create the impulse to act. I've got to have something. I've got to have that new iPhone. I've got to download that new app. It's going to make me feel a certain way. Personally, I'm thinking right now, as my family is holed up in the house, you know, we used to have family nights and game nights. So we've started those again because I remember how great they were with my family. We're ordering pizza on Saturday nights, and we're ordering Pizza Hut because, again, I remember how we used to do that when I was growing up. And then Pizza Hut, of all the other brands out there, has a $5 special. So I'm loading up on 4 or 5 pizzas. They deliver a great pizza experience. It's hot and fresh and on time, and within 5 minutes, they're giving me a survey. So at the end of the day, it's both a mix of rational, what your brand, your experience gives me, those defining benefits, how you make me feel, and then how you personify yourself, okay? And that's really the building blocks of brand building and building a good customer experience. Let's move on. So again, think about it this way, very human instinct. I've got to have that cupcake. I've got to have that cold beer. It's an external stimuli that creates emotion. And then the rational mind kicks in and says, maybe I shouldn't, I'm on a diet. Okay, so it's this mix. My portfolio's down, I should change advisors. Well, no, let's step back and say it's not the advisor's fault. So you really need to understand the emotional impact act and the rational veto. That's how your mind works, whether you're planning a holiday, whether you're going to go to Shoppers Drug Mart, whether you're going to order take-in food. It's a mix of rational and emotional. And let me give you an example. So we have done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of surveys around the world, and these are universal truths regardless of the category. So years ago, we did work with live entertainment, Ticketmaster, and Live Nation down in the States. And a huge percent of the live entertainment experience is emotional, not surprising, okay? Telecom, this was done many, many years ago, but the telecom experience, choice of telecom providers was very emotional, but for all the wrong reasons. You know, Rogers and Bell did not have a good reputation with people. They didn't trust them, they didn't think the service was good or reliable, and the results sort of lighting up the board on negative emotions. And it is a fact that when you experience a negative emotion associated with a brand, it is 3 times more powerful than a positive one. A bad restaurant experience, a bad holiday, bad word of mouth. It's really important as you're putting your value proposition in front of people that you understand if there are any negative associations with that value proposition and address them. Anybody in the advisor business on the phone today, you know, whether you're real estate, insurance, wealth management, a huge part of the advisory business is about emotion and how you personify yourself. One of the most powerful emotions that we have measured as it relates to choosing a broker is, does my broker truly get me? Does he understand my needs? Does he understand my risk tolerance? Or is he just trying to sell me something? And so to the depth of the degree that you project that you really want to understand your clients and have a deep personalized understanding of their needs, that is an important emotional attribute in the advisory business, right down to Tide detergent. I mean, if I was to go out and do Tide detergent, it's about 60, 70% rational. Will it get my clothes clean? Is it a good price? High quality? But the emotional side is, you know, I want my kids going to school in clean clothes. So everything is a mix of rational and emotional. It's critical that you understand for your core clients what makes them tick, emotionally and rationally. Okay? Let me give you another example. So the car categories, I mean, BMW, when you think of the 3 Series, going after those young millennials, when they go out to market, their imagery is all about sleek, fast-flowing, and fast. They talk in their advertising about speed and handling and performance. This BMW is a brand at the end of the day that stands for performance. It says when I'm a male or female, when I'm driving my new 300 Series, I've made it. It's a badge of honor, right? There's something that's coming with the brand. The brand itself is marketing itself as confident, aggressive, extroverted, and I'm feeling this joy when I'm behind the wheel of a BMW. In contrast to Volvo, they've decided they're going after a different audience. They're going after families, and it's all for 50 years now. It's all about solid, sturdy, square. They're the first ones with airbags, the first ones with a steel cage in the back, first ones with anti-lock brakes. And when you drove a Volvo wagon many, many years ago, and maybe to this day, it said, I'm an excellent parent. I'm a loving mom. I'm a loving dad. I've made the right decision for my family. I come across as a brand that's reliable and trustworthy. And at the end of the day, trust Volvo that will deliver on safety. So what's the so what here? The so what is that you need to understand who you're going after from a customer standpoint. And then as you build and adjust your value proposition, what kind of images are you putting out? What are those core rational benefits of your product or service? What does it say about your customers when they work with you? How do you personify yourself and your brand and your organization? And how do you want to make them feel? And create a tight value proposition. And so we created this tool. I won't go into it a lot, but the reality is great brands stand for great things, safety, and think of TD Bank and a brand that, comfortable banking with the green chair. Tim Hortons is all about Canadiana and familiar. Uber is the interesting, Airbnb, the interesting new brands on the street that are disrupting technology. Nike's that inspiring brand about be the best you can be. IBM is knowledgeable. You want to think about TELUS, the friendly brand that's demystifying technology. You want to ask yourself what your brand stands for, right? And at the end of the day, how do you want people to feel or act? But what we're finding in research in the last 6 weeks is this. At the core of everything is trust. Trust has been amplified as an absolute paramount need. Do I trust you as a provider to provide what I need right now? And we're seeing attributes on the right of the map in terms of trustworthy, familiar, safety, nurturing. We're seeing a rebalancing. Someone said the other day when they were talking about creating office cultures, it's gone from let's create a fun atmosphere with foosball tables and great cappuccino makers to social distancing in the office and a safe environment. So there's a rebalancing of attributes, and you've got to make sure that your brand and your customer experience is rebalancing to one of trust, safety, familiarity, and nurture. And so there are a number of attributes, and Claude will say, well, what does this mean for my brand and my customer experience in a minute? But I would ask you that the consumers at this point will go to brands that they trust. Now, if the brand is not available, I'm sure we've all had a grocery experience where my brand is not available, they will consider another brand. Or given that we're heading into a profound economic recession, they might consider another brand. We're seeing that in the United States right now with craft beer. People can't get craft beer. They're thinking a recession's coming, so they're starting to go back to the mainstream brands. But at the end of the day, you've got to ask yourself, do my customers trust my brand? And what reason do I give them for delivering that trust? So what I'd like you to take away from this is understand the most powerful emotions your customers are feeling, not just those that you need to have to get in the game, but those emotions that might differentiate yourself. Make sure that you're delivering a product and an experience that delivers trust and doesn't let them down. It's not so much about fundamentally repositioning who you are, but dialing up these attributes such as trust and safety and reliability and this notion of a connection. I get what you need. I'm going to provide what you need. I have a lot of empathy and understanding for what you're going through. And at the end of the day, when consumers are tightening their wallets, it's going to be about being the most relevant brand wins. And the most relevant brand experience wins. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Matt. So we're going to use the chat window on your screen. 2/3 of what we wanted to share with you, we've shared. Now we're going to talk about what does this all mean. And before we do that, I'd like to just check to the participants that are on the line, if you any questions so far on this notion of the world's changing, what's driving it? It might have something to do with emotion. Are there any questions that come to mind based on what we've just talked about? Just checking the chat window to see if there's any questions we should be speaking to. I do like Mark's comment. We're looking at waves of abnormal for a long time to come, and constant resilience is a key word here. Okay, So what we'd like to do is, on the premise that the world's changing, habits are being formed, and those habits are underpinned by emotional change, we want to provide you a tool or a playbook to figure this out. I believe that you all received from Mary Lou, as a registered participant, an email this morning with a spreadsheet, and that had two spreadsheets in it, actually. It had a spreadsheet that was blank and a spreadsheet that had some content in it. When I say blank, it wasn't populated. Those we're going to refer to next. And the ability for you to understand how to use them is key for your takeaway. Lauren, if you could go to the next page, please. So,
Claude, if
yes.
anybody doesn't have them, just can you put it in the chat box and we'll attach it in a file directly to you.
That'd be great. Or Mary Lou, if you want, you could just attach it in the chat stream. Great. Okay, so all very interesting. We've got this cool thing called emotion and emotional drivers. And what do I do with it? So there's a notion of pre-COVID versus post-COVID. On pre-COVID, one or two questions are really important. What emotional expectations did you provide your customers? I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. And then the second key to that is pre-COVID, where in your transaction with customers did you provide those emotional drivers? It's really important to understand what you did and now what you need to be able to do. So the second part of this equation is, to Matt's point, what new or dialed up emotional drivers do you think your customers are expecting or need from you? And then secondly, where in your transaction should these occur? Pretty simple questions. I'll explain how this works. The graphic you're looking at is a process map with 5 stages for an insurance business. As an example, we're going to use an insurance business or an advisory business as an example. So from end to end, as an insurance broker or a wealth advisor, but in this particular case, an insurance broker, you've got customer stages of awareness, customer stages of consideration and evaluation leading to I'm going to buy, customer experience stage of purchase and ongoing use, followed by a renewal and changes that occur, issues are resolved, and claims. So renewal, changes, and claims. Sorry, renewal and changes followed by claims. 3 questions are being asked. What is your customer's new emotional need, shown by heart? Where are they satisfied in this 5-step journey? And what is it you're doing to deliver that? Keep that in mind. I'll show you how this plays out. Next page. So there's a lot happening on this page, but it's actually pretty simple. What we're doing is we're using an example of an insurance experience that's got 2 channels, a direct-to-broker and an online. The direct-to-broker is me walking into a broker's office physically. So it's knocking on a door, walking into a broker's office versus all online. The scale is to show a couple things. The blue squares are emotional drivers. They are the things that my customer is bringing to the table to say, I really need to feel this when I do business with you. The purple lines are what I expect. The gray boxes are just normal touch points, things that have to happen in the process that I'm not going to score you on. And the red dots are pain points. So as you look at this, and the top direct broker channel, the first blue box on the left, it's meeting my expectations, so I'm good. The second blue box, which is below the table stakes line, is way below what I expect. It's a big problem, and I'll show you what that means in a second. The next blue box in the middle of the page, direct broker channel, is also got a red dot. It's above the table stakes line, it's above what the competition is offering, but it's not what I expect. And then lastly, on the direct broker channel, there's one that's really, really below par. I'm expecting a lot, I'm not getting it. you could say that any one of those blue boxes that is not meeting what I'm expecting to see, I'm walking. You're not going to get me as a prospect. I'm leaving, or I'm going to bail on you. If you're meeting my expectations, I'll stay. Emotional gaps cause that kind of fight or flight syndrome. In other words, if I feel that this is a really important thing I need to feel and you're not delivering it, I'm out of here. We'll show you the next page some examples. So on the top channel, direct broker channel, who would have ever thought that I need to feel safe in the consideration and evaluation process? Never. I never would have thought that would have been a consideration as I thought about buying insurance, that I don't feel safe. Middle one, purchase and ongoing. I walk into the agency and I see 8 people in crammed desks. It's a very tight space, no plexiglass, no social distancing. And I look and I say, I don't think these guys take COVID-19 seriously. And you know, that's important for me. I want to feel that the person I'm working with takes this seriously. In renewal, I just got my renewal bill and it went up 20%. They don't get it. My family's struggling. They don't understand what I'm going through. How could they? In the bottom channel, there's a blue box that's below the line. I feel smart, but I'm still a bit confused. And I want to feel smart, but I'm still a bit confused. Next one, why do I need to come to the office at all? Don't they understand that social distancing should be at play here? Or the next box, I feel relieved. I don't have to go in the office. I can do everything online. I feel safe. I feel relieved. And then lastly, they're human and I need to be patient. I'm struggling a bit, but I do need to be patient. These are bringing some attributes into the mix that as a business owner or leader, you never would have been considered. I'm going to give you an example I saw actually this morning. I saw online a landlord advertising that their heating and ventilation system now has HEPA filters. Who would have considered HEPA filters as a purchase decision criteria for having an office or a store? It now is important. It's really weird.
In fact, it's even a point of difference, Claude, I would argue.
It is a point of difference. And I don't know if they're appealing to fear or not, but they're messaging that it's a big deal. Next page, Lauren. So here's what we're going to do. And we're going to take a few minutes to walk you through what this looks like and then open up to questions. You have 2 charts in your inbox. One looks like the top one. It is the before chart. So it's empty. It's just got the rows and columns for your use. The bottom of this page is the after chart. And it looks like what you have when you've completed the exercise. And we're going to actually walk through an example, which is our insurance agency right now. So when you're done, your homework assignment, should you choose to do that, because whenever we do webinars, we want to make sure there's a good clear takeaway that you can actually use this tool. And by the way, Matt said something that was very important. We've probably done every industry sector out there. So, and we're going to give you our email addresses. So if you have questions, feel free to either ask today or follow up with us by email. We'd be happy to help. So what we're going to do is we're going to work through what this looks like. Next page. There are 4 steps that you need to do. And for purposes of today, I'm going to ask you to put yourself into the shoes of an insurance agency, and you're a broker at an insurance agency. You have a storefront and you've got digital channels. And you have 5 steps across the top. You have an awareness stage that you're trying to tell the world about who you are. Your conversion stage, where you're trying to get your prospects to sign up. You have a purchase usage stage where you wish to have people not past purchase, they're using your product or service. You have a claims process or issue resolution where people are resolving problems. And then you have a community stage where you are creating loyalty. let me walk you through what your pre-COVID would have looked like. Nope, stay previous page, thank you. In the awareness stage, probably the only driver that's a gray box would have been respect. And again, this is hypothetical, so please take this in the spirit it's intended. You may want to add others, but this would be a fairly comprehensive view of what might your world look like. In the awareness stage, you probably want to make sure your prospect feels respected. One way of doing that is easy to follow website. So I don't feel stupid. I actually can figure this out. These guys are pretty good. I should be thinking about buying from them. So I feel respect. I'm going to continue to the right. Trust. I want to feel trust in the conversion that I'm making a trust. And again, I'm speaking from a customer's point of view. I want to feel that these guys are trustful. And the way you do that is you have a long-standing reputation in the community. Also, in the conversion process, I want to feel respect. I want to let customers take their time to make decisions. I'm not going to push them. I'm going to let them take their time, answer all the questions that they have. In the purchase, I want to feel loyal. I want to let them know that we're here to build relationships. This is about a loyal, trust-based relationship. And trust, consistent and no surprises. I heard from my friends that these guys were good guys. They are. They delivered on what I thought they would. No surprises. They're consistent. They're worthy of my trust. A few more. On the claims process, they're critical. They treat claims with seriousness. So they don't skim over the details. They do the right things. And on the bottom one, in terms of safe, all contractors treat my family with safe practices. Now, here's what's interesting. That's the only place that safe shows up in a pre-COVID world. You'll see that shortly, how that's different. The last two, loyal, stick with me through tough times. So I feel loyal to my agency if I am having a rough patch economically or financially, and they stick with me. They deserve my loyalty. And under respect, continue to provide benefits for long-standing customers. It's amazing how much that drives respect when I get special pricing, I get things that aren't offered to someone off the street because I'm a long-term customer. This is the emotional map from the trustworthy zone for an insurance agency through the eyes of a customer pre-COVID. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm just looking if there's any questions in the chat. If none, I'm going to go to the next one. Lauren, if you could go to the next page, please. Thank you. Now you're going to see a lot of blue boxes, and I'm going to call out a few. And I spoke to the safe zone, safe emotion as an example that we're going to call out here. I'll speak to the others, but I want to start with safe. If we're in a post-COVID world, and I know my customers want to feel safe, never have I thought that I should do things in my business that allow my customer to feel safe in the awareness stage. Completely different world. So what would I do? There's a blue box called where and how in awareness. And what it is that the customer is saying to themselves is, I don't need to speak to anyone in person to learn about your business. I can learn everything I want online, and it's easy to do. I feel safe. Next one, conversion. I can sign my insurance documents digitally, and I don't need to come to the office. I feel safe. The worst thing you could do is, if safe is a driver of engagement and purchase, is to say, you can learn about us online, but you got to come into our office and you got to talk to us and touch paper and breathe the same air. You're not going to feel safe. We probably lost you as a customer. Third section, purchase and usage. When I did come to the office, you took great care in social distancing, so I felt safe. In the claims process, issue resolution. Everyone throughout the claims process, including all contractors, respected my family's safety. I just personally had this experience last week. My furnace broke down. I had a technician show up in my house, and the technician had a mask, gloves, asked permission if he could come into the house, and asked that I don't come within 10 feet of him. And I thought, this is pretty cool. I feel safe. And then lastly, in community, they did the same safe job for my family who I recommended. So it wasn't they just did it for me, they did it for some friends that I recommended. Hopefully that's helping you understand that if you look at the gray boxes, the only place that safe showed up in pre-COVID was in the claims process. It's showing up everywhere. So as Matt had shared with you, and I'll share with you now, if you're not aware that safe, a feeling of safe, the emotion of safe, as an example, is a key driver of my purchase decision, and you're operating without that knowledge, you're probably not building great, trusting prospect relationships or being able to close business if you're in this space. Another example that's actually very powerful is in second one down, critical. I want to know, as I look at conversion, that these guys really take this seriously, that they're not paying lip service to COVID-19 and social distancing in the conversion process, in the purchase process, in the claims process. All this to say, we're trying to open up your eyes to the fact that your customer has a different set of emotional drivers that will change their thinking on how they purchase products. Let me jump to the next page. When you're finished the exercise we've just gone through, and by the way, we've just gone through the top third, you'll see trustworthy is the first zone. And we call these the COVID flight zones. So if you recall that brand map pie chart that Matt was showing you, there were 8 zones. There are 3 that are a flight to. One's trustworthy, one's familiar, one's nurturing. Once you're done, it may look like something like this for your business. Next page. So putting this in perspective, behaviors are shifting, new habits are being formed, and the habits are actually sustaining. The shift in the emotional drivers is a dial-up to trustworthy, familiar, and nurturing zones. And it's not to say that the other zones aren't important. It's to say that there's a dial-up that they're being overweighted. So my value of my purchase decision on trust, familiar, and nurturing is probably higher. Your customers, number 3, your customers are over-indexing on these as they conduct their business. You need to be aware of that. We did this particular workshop last week with another group, and the comment was, I don't know what those are. So best advice I can give you, talk to your customers and ask them what is important to them in the new world and how they're doing business with you now. Number 4, assessing your business in light of your prospects and customers. If you're going to start this, the area where you're probably hurting the most in this new learning is in the first 2 stages, prospecting and conversion. Most organizations do a good job on the usage. Most organizations do a good job on the post-purchase issue resolution. But how you think about messaging your value prop that's consistent with the emotional drivers your customers are feeling is probably something very new to you. And then lastly, your ability to translate these learnings into processes and things you deliver, said another way, that your office staff actually understands what you're doing and why you're doing it, and we actually need to message and be safe if that was a driver of purchase. Next page, Lauren. So we're going to stop, and we want you to go back to Pull Everywhere. It's where you started the day. And for those of you who are new, if you would go to your phone or your PC and go to pullev.com level 5. We'd like to ask if you have any questions on the dots that we've connected for you today. And as you're doing that, I'll just play that back. We've tried to connect 3 dots. 1, the world is changing, no surprise. Those changes are driving habits. Those habits are going to change how people think about purchase decisions. Those habits are underpinned by emotional drivers. Your ability to understand those emotional drivers and understand where they occur in people's purchase decision is key. I'm just looking at the chat to see if there's any questions, or I'm looking on screen. Russ, if this is turned on, we'll see if there's any questions or comments.
I'd also like to add, if you click on participants at the bottom of the screen, you'll get some new icons, and there's a raise hand there. If you raise your hand, if you will open up your mic and you can ask your question live.
Matt, I'm going to ask you to speak to the question that's on the screen because I know you'll have an answer to this. Can you give a brief review of the value proposition post-COVID?
Well, I mean, it would depend on the category, it would depend on the product, but I would say that, you know, you need to identify in a post-COVID world those defining rational attributes. So what is it they get? Quality product, good experience, great tasting food. What are those rational benefits? And then the other 50% are the emotional benefits and how you personify yourself. So again, how do you want your customers to feel at the end of the day? And how do you want to personify yourself? And identify right now in a post-COVID world, are there any pain points that you need to address? So in the example that Claude just gave, safe might actually even be a new category ante, right? If your experience is not considered safe, they may just eject immediately. So understand those negatives, but at the end of the day, try to understand what's unique about your brand and your value proposition, and see if you need to make any adjustments in terms of what you're giving customers and how you're making them feel. Those are the 2 big questions, and those are the questions that we build in a pre-COVID world. Whether you're talking a value proposition for Sick Kids Hospital or a Chevrolet, car. At the end of the day, it's the defining benefits they get by using your service or buying your product. And in a post-COVID world, do you need to make any adjustments around trust and safety and reliability?
There's a comment in the chat. Mark brought a good point. And I want to be clear, Mark, we're not in a post-COVID world. We're in a new normal, and the chart and the playbook that we provided for you is in fact useful in a new normal while we're in COVID, as expectations are shifting, as well as post-COVID. The chart that we showed you around the aftershocks, people are not going to be changing overnight when we get a vaccine. This thing's going to be around for a long time. The notion of being able to understand your emotional drivers of your customers over the next several months, years is important. So to your comment, it absolutely is key longer term. Good question. How do you feel the shift will impact the length of the sales cycle of the purchasing decision? Our experience so far is it's not drastically changing the length of the sales cycle, but you need to, in the early part of the sales cycle, convey that you understand the drivers that are important. So if I don't hit, and I'll give you best example, I thought this happened on the weekend for me. I went into hardware stores are now open. I went into a hardware store on the weekend, and I will go back there a lot. They had 2 kids at the front cleaning up the buggies. So they literally said, you need to take a cart. It's clean. We are gauging the number of people in the store by how many carts are in play. I'm in. They've got me for their business because they took it seriously, and I got the message right away. So the whole notion of, will this change the length of time for the purchase for the purchasing cycle? I think it won't if you're clear about your messaging around the emotional drivers that are important to your customer. If you aren't, you probably won't see them.
Can I add one thing to that, Claude? I mean, we're talking about a post-COVID world and safety. We also need to be thinking ahead to potentially a huge economic disruption, right? Everyone's talking about this won't be a V, it'll be a big long U, hopefully not a W. But at the end of the day, we are heading into a period of economic distress that will also change how people act. And one of the things that we learned in 2008 and we're learning again now is you've got to ask yourself, in terms of your product or your service, what is the value for money? Okay, so this isn't necessarily a flight to discount. It is, are you giving your customers good value for money? Whether they're paying for private school tuition or whether they're buying a luxury product or even a staple, at the end of the day, the notion of good value for money is going to be dialed up and accentuated. So I think you really need to understand that that lens is going to be much more acute when buying or remaining with any kind of a product or a service in the new world.
There's another question, Mary Lou, we'll take and then throw it back to you. What advice do you have for building relationships and building trust with prospects? It actually is the second part of your question. What are some thoughtful questions that you'd use to uncover or better understand their emotional need? I would, and what I've counseled other clients to do is find friendly fire to actually sit down and ask questions virtually of a customer prospect and ask them what they value in doing business with you. Take the list that's on the playbook. Those are the emotional drivers, and literally ask the question. And I'd share that page with them and say, in your consideration of buying from me, what do you weigh? What do you consider? What's important to you? They will tell you, if you give them that list, they will tell you the 3, 4, 5 things that are really important. And if you probe, they'll actually tell you where those emotions should occur. We've used SAFE as an example, but they'll also speak to, I want to feel comfortable. So as you think of that spreadsheet, our playbook, there are words around comfort. I want to feel smart. I want to feel that you've been sincere with me. They'll tell you where they're at. That will help you figure out that question.
Yeah, and again, Claude, if I could add on to that, I mean, it'll always remain true that, you want your brand and your product to be relevant to people. You want to be able to tick all the boxes in terms of things you need to be just to be in the game, just to be in the consideration set. And maybe safety is one of those category antes now. But it'll always remain true that that brands that meaningfully differentiate, that do something a little bit different, like the brand at the hardware store that was wiping down the carts in the front. Maybe Home Depot's not doing that. So you always still want to ask yourself, am I in a post-COVID world hitting all the boxes for category antes, but how do I differentiate on something that's very, very meaningful for your customers? And it could just be a little handwritten note if you're in the advisory business. It could be some other gesture. But at the end of the day, what can you do to differentiate yourself from everybody else? Maybe even pick up some new clients in this post-COVID world once you've delivered those emotional and rational category antes.
Lauren, if you could go to the next page, we'll hand it off to Mary Lou.
Okay, thank you everyone for participating today. I noticed there's a couple questions we didn't answer. We will, if you want to follow up and send an email to either myself, marylou@ageworks.co, and no, that's not a typo. It is actually .co, not .ca and not .com, or Matt Kelly at Level 5 Strategy, or Claude Ricks at Level 5. That always throws me off when I see it in all lowercase, Claude.
Sorry about that.
So feel free to follow up via email. We are recording this, but I'm not sure if it's gone into the cloud because I didn't record it from the main Zoom account, but we will figure out a way to get it to people if they want a copy of the recording. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So our next webinar, as I said, we are doing these as our way to give back. We are scheduling into June right now. They'll be published shortly. But the next webinar is next Wednesday, May 27th, 1 o'clock, and it's post-forward motion in a COVID era. The speaker is Leslie Kelvin. She's a leadership development consultant, and she's going to talk a lot about emotional intelligence and the way that plays into the way you behave, the way your employees behave, and the way your clients might behave. So you can register at ageworks.co, and thank you again for everyone for attending. Hope you had an interesting and inspiring time.
Thanks all.
Goodbye, everyone. Stay safe.
Be safe.